One of the things that I've been wanting to show you guys for a while now and kind of run through and explain how it works, plus give you an update on all the fish and whatnot, is my, what is this, 16-foot long aquarium racking system. And I think the most important part is to start way over on the other side with the twin 40-gallon tanks. In here, of course, we're quarantining some cardinal tetras, which, oh, we've got one that didn't make it. And that's fine. Bound to happen. You're going to lose a few. Cardinal tetras do not ship well. However, once you've had them between 4 and 6 weeks and they've, gone through quarantine relatively successfully, they're going to be pretty hardy. However, they don't ship well. And in my experience, if you get 100, perhaps 50 live. It's the unfortunate side to cardinals, in my opinion. With that said, we have a little more than 200. I plan to take around 50 of them and put them with my piranha, maybe upwards of 100, and then the other 100, or 150, you can actually look at it now. Tamara's going to kill me, but they'll go in her planted tank, which is just exploding with plant growth. This tank system here, that'll be fully planted here eventually. It's going to be moved out of the way so we can get a full view. And then she's going to have to dump some more aqua soil over there and do some more planting and whatnot. But obviously, her plants are doing absolutely phenomenal. And her key to success is, I just leave it alone. Must be nice. Below this 40-gallon quarantine, which is a standalone system when we're using a Hamburg matin filter that we built, is another 40-gallon tank with the same type of filter. Essentially, this is a 1.5 inch, almost, maybe it's even 2-inch thick sponge filter with a pump and heater behind it. And the pump is pumping all the water from the back of the sponge to the front, giving us some circulation and whatnot. However, this sponge filter serves as our mechanical as well as biological filtration system. It's probably one of the best types of filters you can have in quarantine and or a fry tank. And that's what brings us to the next one. Set up identically, and I'm not so sure we're going to be able to see so well into this tank because it doesn't technically have a light on it, because lights in quarantine aren't necessarily important, but these are those flower horn which are growing really quickly. You'll remember though that I had originally added a massive amount of the fry to this tank. However, we ran out of quarantine space. I added these guys to it instead, which are the original 8, might be 9 or 10. And they cleared that tank out within a day, eating all of the fry. Probably like 200-300 fry, which is fine. It's a natural food source, strongest survival type tactics going on in this tank. But I really didn't want to have to take care of 200 flower horn fry right now, simply because I don't have the space. I got too much on the go, and we will circle back to that. However, in the next system, we do have the parents with some of their fry in here. We left them with some of their babies, and the babies are doing just fine. This is the father as well as the mother, and they do have some of the babies. You can see them kind of swimming around, and they're still doing fine. And this is more sustainable, enjoyable, and acceptable, as opposed to having hundreds and hundreds of flower horn, which eventually would need their own aquariums to grow out properly. The next tank over, and you have to excuse the algae on the tanks because I simply don't care if there's algae. This is Tyrese's tank. Tyrese is my Fahaka puffer. He's around, I would say 10 inches, perhaps upwards of a foot. And he just has some Anubias of various types, whether it's Anubias nana or the other type of bigger species in here with him, attached to some lava rock and some lace rock. And he's got a light just because he's got plants in there. However, long-term goals, we're going to have to get to this eventually. I'm not so sure if he's going to stay in this tank. Neither will them, because those 40s eventually are going to come down here. You'll see that there's no tanks here. However, this is a 40-gallon tank, just like those down there. I left enough space because of eventually I'm shutting that down because it's just too cramped over there, and I just want to run this system. All three of these, we'll get to that. And then, of course, the ray that doesn't grow. I would say that maybe he is 6 inches across, and he's well over a year old. No matter how often I feed him, and you can see how fat he is, he just doesn't grow. And I think one of the issues with rays these days is I think that they are so watered down, they're so interbred, and we're seeing more and more issues with them. I'm seeing a lot of stingrays keeper get rays, and then the ray has problems and it passes away. And I think that's just supply and demand. And a lot of stingray breeders are just tossing anything two together, whether they're brothers or sisters, and after generations and generations, we're just getting watered down and weaker stingrays. I don't know if this little guy's ever going to grow, and I would say that it's slightly embarrassing because I've been keeping stingrays for well over 15 years, probably pushing 20 years. It's the reason, this fish is the reason I started building fish tanks in the first place. Not him specifically, but freshwater stingrays. And I've never had more problems with stingrays than getting into some of the newer ones for sale. Now, he was with that with the blind stingray, and you notice she's not in here. And that's something also that I'd like to address, is that back in January, she passed away. I think that she was just too far gone. We did our best. I was her life support system. Getting her to cling on to life. She lasted about a month, but eventually just, succumbed to a number of too many genetic deformities and abnormalities. And of course, that shipping was just absolutely tragic and likely caused too many issues with her, not only her osmogulatory system, but her, she had really bad ammonia burn and whatnot. But this guy was in the same tank with her the entire time, and you can look at how frisky he is. He just doesn't grow. He might possibly be a dwarf stingray, the first of his kind. No, and like I said, I feed this guy 2 to 3 times a day, and he just simply doesn't grow. It's relatively interesting. It's kind of cute and funny. But in my opinion, it's just bringing on more frustration and more evidence of stingrays being bred for sales and money and to produce numbers, as opposed to keeping a bloodline incredibly strong and hardy. Because one of the biggest things when it comes to freshwater stingrays is if you can get them to eat, they're relatively bulletproof. However, I'm finding they're the first fish to go in a tank. They're now becoming the canary in the coal mine type of deal. Really sad, but I think that this guy's probably going to end up in the 2000 with everybody else because his main diet is pellets, and that's what that tank eats. So we'll see what happens there. Obviously, he can't stay in a 60-gallon for the rest of his life, but this would be 60, 120, 180 gallons plus a 40-gallon sump, which has around 20 gallons of water in it, making this a 200-gallon system. Now, when I move these other pairs of 40-gallon tanks under here, they're going to remain on their own standalone system, so I can still quarantine and do other things. Long term, these tanks, all of them, will become fully planted, so he's likely going to end up in the 2000. Tyrese might as well. I don't know. I have no guaranteed whether he'll stay in here or end up in the 2000. He is a friendly fish that doesn't really attack anybody else unless they're babies. He loves to eat fry. But he's doing absolutely fantastic. And if you look at his torpedo shape, this is how a puffer is going to look, and this is how you get longevity out of your puffers. I think a lot of people overfeed and look for it to just be this big ball of mush, but that would make him overweight. That would shorten his lifespan. It's no different than feeding your fish hot dogs, etc., and then one day it passes and well, you know how that goes. This tank over here will be planted as well. I might move them to a 40, but I do have another 70-gallon tank that I'm thinking about putting them in, just keeping them together. But the fact that they continuously and constantly breed If they don't have fry in this tank, they will lay eggs. That's why there's fry in there. I'm trying to stop them from breeding. Imagine that. You have 2 fish that are unlikely to breed that can produce viable fry, that you want them to stop breeding, so you keep fry in there. And as long as there's fry in here, they won't breed. As soon as I take these guys out, they're going to lay eggs. So we'll see what happens there. Each tank will have a different type of scape. I want to do planted tanks down here, and I want them to be kind of hands-off. I've already been collecting supplies and whatnot. And believe it or not, we're going to have lights here eventually. However, you're probably wondering, how does this entire system work? Well, it kind of starts down here with this pump that I've had for about 8 years. Look at the detritus in here. The fact that I left this painted white just helps me see everything and take things out a little bit easier. We have a few sponge filters meant for really small, 10 to 15 gallon tanks. Just sitting in here, always cycle just in case there's an emergency and I've got to set up something. But the pump is pumping water up to the tanks. This is the main return line, and then it splits. One goes here, and then it continues along the wall, and another T-split goes in here, and then the final return line goes there. If you'll notice, each one of them has a little ball valve allowing me to control the flow of each return. Now, if I didn't have these ball valves on here, water will always travel the path of least resistance. And when you think of it, what would be the least resistance? Well, a lot of the times it's the shortest distance. So most of the water would be pumped here. And because the aquarium pump is stronger than what this can handle as a probably a 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, 5/8 output, the rest of the water would just kind of trickle out over there. So this one gets closed a little bit, this one gets closed a little bit, and then this one remains wide open. And at wide open, we get a decent amount of flow. However, when power shuts off, if that water, that return line wasn't below or above the water surface, we'd create a form of suction, which would, of course, allow all of this water, however deep into the water the returns are, it would suck the water out and it would all drain to the sump. That's not going to happen. It's only going to drain to right below the bulkhead. So as water's pumping out, you can see in the back, there's a bulkhead there. All these tanks are going to get backgrounds too. And each one, instead of draining into a central line, I decided what I would do is each one, you can see this one's return line, this one's return line, and of course, and ignore the algae. These are just like quarantine, holding tanks. I don't care what it looks like. They all come down and go right to the sump for filtration. The benefit to this is they all share the same water and stability. It only needs one heater. Everything occurs in the sump, but we get more water volume. However, if something were to happen, for some reason he gets sick, I got to treat this tank, boom, I close this valve, toss in a couple of those sponge filters, and he now has a standalone tank. Of course, I'd have to add in a heater, but because it is a ray, of course, I'd have to protect it with some sort of mesh. As the water flows down into this tank, you're met with this big gray bucket. It might look familiar, and I'll show you what you think it is. It's one of these. So this is one of those Temu over-the-head filters. The way this system works is I've got a pump behind this background. It's pumping up. Spray bar goes here through its mechanical filtration, then biological, and finally coming out of the top. I'll show you what that kind of looks like. This system doesn't have a ton of flow. It's actually incredibly slow, but tremendous amount of contact time. This is a trickle tower. Maybe we can lift this up a little bit. Kind of see it all drilled with holes. Typically speaking, these are used as overhead filters. And then down on Tamara's shell dweller tank, which is super cool. You guys all love shell dweller tanks. This tank is 4 feet long, 2 feet wide, 12 inches tall, 10 inches tall. She has a pump in the tank that pumps water to the top, sprays over the mechanical filtration, and then through biological, finally exiting the tank. These are typically designed to be overheads. And I thought to myself, nothing's stopping me from taking one of my big boys and using it as a bio tower, because these are so cheap. So water flows through all of this sponge. And then, of course, I'm pretty sure I should be able to lift this up. Well, you're not going to be able to see it, but it's going to rain evenly, and you can see the tops. This bottom chamber is filled with ceramic media. Finally, it exits these two holes. So I can use these as overhead filters or as sump compartments or overhead filters, no problem. Long term, like I said, I'm going to move these 40s over to here, probably in about 4 weeks once we are finished. Look at the glow. Once we remove or are finished quarantining the cardinal tetras, and of course remove that dead body. That sucks, but honestly, I think we've lost 2, and I think there's 220. So personally, I think we're doing really good. These guys will stay in that tank. They'll come over here, and in the coming weeks, I want to do like fully planted, fully aquascape, probably throw in some backgrounds, make these incredibly beautiful tanks. And as for fish, I'm just not sure. Tyrese can probably stay, but I'd love to see him back out in the gallery. To be fair, I do miss this fish, and I would like to see him come back out there with us. Because we've had him for what, 7 years? Something like that? 6 years? 5 years? I don't know. Somebody will know. But that is that racking system, and all of it's sitting on these concrete blocks. I showed you actually how I built this. And technically, I didn't really build it. Obviously, I didn't form these blocks, and I just cut these 2x8s and painted it black, but it's kind of slick. But that is these tanks and, you know, their purpose and what's been going on with them. There you have it. And Tamara's not supposed to be back here. This is the No Tamara's Club because she's got Queen's Cove over on her side. If you don't remember, we converted a large percentage of the basement into kind of like a fish room where my side's painted black and hers is painted white. She has way more tanks than I do, where she documents on her channel. However, there's one last thing that I'm going to give you, and that's a little insight into the 2,000 gallon filter that I just added. And you guys are actually going to recognize this filter because we used it when we originally set up the 2,000 gallon aquarium. I re-added my Ultima filter that's rated for like 2,000 to 4,000 gallons and put it on the 2,000. We'll deep dive into this a little bit more. But one of the things that I did is because of the K1 coldness and or the fluidized media that used to be in it, and this doesn't work as a fluidized filter. Water gets pumped in and the water stays stagnant, but when it backwashes, it kind of lifts it up. I don't really need K1 coldness or anything like that. And a big reason, and I'm going to show it to you. Oh, damn. Remember those big spotlights that we added to the 2000 at one point? Well, I put them outside because they weren't growing plants at all. And now we use it as, well, Luke calls it his nightlight. Anyways, right here is what I want to show you. This is what used to be in it. And just take a piece of it. Over time, after many years, this stuff breaks apart and leaves a bunch of flakes in your tanks. Like, oh, it's frozen because it's out here, but that's what you see. That's what would be in your fish tanks. Those little lines everywhere. It was disgusting and nasty. So I decided I have to figure out something that is far more longer lasting, because to be fair, 6, 7, 8 years, I think maybe this stuff might have even been upwards of 10 years old. Well, it's not enough. I want to buy things once. So in that filter that we just set up are a bunch of these bio balls. Approximately 3,000 of them that, well, you guys know what bio balls are for wet dries and whatnot. They're just plastic and zinc. Inside of them, this is what separates them from a lot of stuff. Don't look at my face. Is sponge. Most bio balls don't have that. They just add surface area. With the sponge in there, adding a tremendous amount more surface area makes them far more efficient. However, bioballs and biological media is extremely expensive. And believe it or not, I got them off Temu too. I've seen, whenever I talk about Temu, a lot of people trash and be like, oh, Temu this and Temu that. Like, a lot of your products and even your favorite stores and you name it don't get a lot of their stuff designed or built or parts of it made in China. I got these on Temu for next to nothing. I uninstalled my app and reinstalled it so I could be a new user or a reinstalled user. I got a $100 coupon code, and if you search the code that I'm going to leave, I'll leave a link so you get the $100 coupon code and a code that you can search, that if you search that, you'll get 30% off your order. So my suggestion is go stock up on biological media. It's on there. There's a lot of stuff on there. You might as well get it for next to nothing with free shipping. Obviously, I'm a huge supporter of the local fish stores and shopping local, etc. But there are some things that are annoying to purchase, and some of that is biological media. It's abundantly overly priced. However, if you use my code and or my link, it's going to cost you next to nothing. And like I said, I'm going to leave a link in the description below. Hope you guys enjoy it. I see a lot of YouTubers doing Temu now, and it's because it's like dirt cheap and the stuff works. Like, do you think I care where plastic was made? And it's really hardy. I've got like 8 of these filters. I even use it on the 700. There's another one. And look, this is all backing media. Like a big wall of it that I got on Temu as well. And a pile. All of it running my entire system. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Like I said, links and codes are in the description. If you already, it's for new users or reinstalled users. I double checked and triple checked. And all your purchases, I get a little kickback. So that's going to help me continue to buy my stuff. Hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you guys in the next one.